All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join our webinar today. Really appreciate it. My name is Ben Frisch. I direct business development here at accept.blue. And I'll be the one, chewing off your ear today for the next 30 minutes or so. For those of you not yet resellers of accept.blue, so you have my sincere sympathies, but as a brief introduction, we are a processor and ISO agnostic payment gateway, and we differentiate ourselves from what's out there on the market through four key characteristics. One is our full white label model, which gives you stronger branding and stickier merchants, etc. The second thing is our focus on card not present in general and on the B2B industries in particular. So what that means is that we have specific features that make this platform an excellent fit for not for card not present merchants, but B2B merchants in particular. And those features would be automated level 2 and 3 interchange optimization, ACH processing, email and text invoicing, integrated payments, hosted payment pages, and more. The third thing is our beautiful and intuitive user interface and experience. And lastly, but very importantly, our revolutionary Schedule A, which is very different than the Schedule A's that you've been seeing from other payment gateways and is guaranteed to grow your profits. Today's webinar is going to focus on our most recent solution, our newest feature, which is card not present compliance surcharge. And what you can expect in the next 20 to 30 minutes is as follows. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you and show you what exactly you can expect and how to use this feature, both from an ISO and merchant perspective. Next, we're gonna be joined by James Shepard, who is the CEO of CC Sales Pro, an expert on lots of different things when it comes to merchant services, specifically Surcharge. And I'm going to be asking him some questions, which I'm sure have crossed many of the minds here today in the past. Lastly, if there's still some time, we'll open the floor for questions and answers. At any point during the webinar, please feel free to submit questions using the Q&A button at the bottom. If we manage to answer your question during the webinar, that's great. If not, please be assured that we'll make sure to answer via email post-call. The call is going to be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel. So if there's some emergency that makes you leave, you can always watch the rest of it at a later time. So the first thing I'm going to do right now is I'm going to share my screen with you. We'll get right to business and show you exactly how this feature works. So I've just logged into my ISO portal. So we're looking at this from an ISO's perspective. Any of you that are resellers are familiar with this portal. It's where you come to create your merchants, track your merchants, support your merchants, etc. I'm going to go ahead and click on my merchant list and find a specific merchant account that we'll be working with today. And I'm going to click on the view icon to open up this merchant's profile. So right here on the first tab, the general tab, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and we're going to get to a section called Surcharge Control. And I'm going to show you what we can do over here in regards to surcharge. So let's say the ISO wants to set compliance surcharge for this merchant's account. So what they're going to do is they're going to come here to this section and they're going to click on compliance surcharge. Once they click on that button, that means they're requiring surcharge for this merchant's account. That means all transactions running through this merchant's account will have a compliance surcharge apply. You can see that if you're choosing compliant, then that automatically means that this affects all transactions, because if it's compliant, that means every transaction coming through this account is going to have a surcharge. I'm going to go ahead and set an amount of 4%. Just to point out, if I try putting in a 5%, it won't let me, because since this is compliant, this is capping me at 4%. And I could go ahead and save these settings, and that's going to be that. I just want to point out that when it comes to compliance surcharge, there's a few things to be aware of. One is that obviously being compliant, surcharge will only be applied to credit, but not debit or prepaid cards. We use one of the most accurate BIN APIs to differentiate in real time if the card being entered is a credit or debit. And we're only going to apply the surcharge to a credit card, but not to a debit card. The next thing is that it can only be set as a percentage, so no flat dollar amounts. You can't set a $2 surcharge to be applied to every transaction. Thirdly, it's capped at 4%. And next is that at this point, our compliance surcharge feature is certified on the TSYS and American Express ESA platforms only. We are not yet certified for a surcharge on the First Data platforms. There's one more point that I want to make, is that as the gateway, but not the ISO, we can only give you the technology and the tools to set up compliance surcharge for your merchants. But actual compliance is something that is in your hands, and it's something that you need to make sure is being taken care of between you and the merchant. So making sure the merchant is a location that allows surcharge and is registered with the proper entities. Again, we're giving you the ability, we're giving you the platform to offer a compliance surcharge feature, but actual compliance is you and your merchant's responsibility. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save these settings for this merchant. I'm going to click on update. And now that my merchant account is updated, we're going to switch over to the merchant's virtual terminal. So I'm switching over right over here. This is the account I just updated. I'm going to move over to the process transaction tab. And we're going to go ahead and select a customer. I'm going to use my surcharge customer that I created for today's webinar. And we're going to scroll down here and we're going to refresh this page. And we're going to see a 4% surcharge sitting there. So I'm going to go ahead again, just let me select that, that customer again. And I've got my surcharge. And because right now there's a debit card that's selected, the surcharge is showing as 0%. I'm going to go ahead and use a different card. I'm going to select a credit card. And what's going to happen is that the surcharge just changed to 4%. So the system is checking, is this a credit or is this a debit card? If it's a credit card, it's applying that 4%. If it's a debit card, it's not going to apply it. So let's put in an amount of, let's say, $10 to make it simple for today. So it's $10.40. And again, to show one more time, if I'm going to go ahead and switch to a debit card, that surcharge gets grayed out and the total is $10 flat. There's no additional fee being added. There's nothing that the merchant can do to change these settings because you've set it on an ISO level. It's completely out of the merchant's control. So the merchant can, they can choose between credit and debit, but they can't affect the actual surcharge. Okay, so that's scenario number one, where as an ISO, you've just enabled compliance surcharge on a merchant's account. Let's look at another scenario. Let's switch back to the ISO portal. Bear with me. And let's go back to our merchant that we just played with. So suppose I'm an ISO and I say, you know what? I don't want to set compliance surcharge. I want it to be more of a service fee that's applied to all transactions, be it credit, be it debit. I don't want to be beholden to, I don't want to set it as a compliance surcharge program. I want to be more of a service fee. So in that case, we'll come back to the merchant's profile, unclick compliance surcharge, and we can leave it as 4%. We could put, let's say, 3% just to make it different. And we can also put a fee, let's say, for ACH. Let's say I want $2 for ACH transactions. That's across all transactions. I want 3% for all card transactions. And I do not want it to be a compliant type of fee. So I'm going to go ahead again and click on save. We'll update this merchant. And we go back to our merchant's account. We refresh this page. I'm going to select my merchant, my customer again. And right now I have a 3% surcharge set because that's what the ISO set. And regardless of which card I select, if it's a credit or a debit card, that 3% will always be sitting there. So again, because this was set on an ISO level, there's nothing the merchant can do to change this surcharge or to take away this fee, this service fee. And regardless of what type of card is selected, that fee will always be applied. That's scenario number two. Let's talk about one more scenario, and then we'll move on to another part of this. Let's say an ISO says, I don't want to get involved in this fee at all. I want it to be completely merchant controlled. So forget compliant, forget non-compliant. I want the merchant to be the one to decide if there's any fee added to this transaction or not. It should be controlled by my merchant. In that case, you just uncheck everything. You don't make any selections on this merchant's profile. You leave everything as off, and you go ahead and you click on save just to update this merchant again. And we'll go back to our account. We'll refresh the page, and we'll go ahead and select our customer. And right now, the surcharge is sitting here as 4%, but this is completely controllable by the merchant. So clicking on settings, they can choose to have a surcharge of 4% or a set dollar amount, or they can hide this field entirely. It's completely up to them. So suppose as a merchant, I want a 5% or let's say 2% fee. And I'm gonna go ahead and click on Save Changes. Right now, my surcharge says 2%. And because it's merchant controlled in this case, I can just take it out entirely. I can leave it as no surcharge. It's completely my call as the merchant. So we ran through 3 scenarios. One is where the ISO is controlling it as a compliance surcharge. Scenario 2 was where the ISO was controlling it as a service fee. And scenario number 3 was where the ISO was leaving it in the merchant's control and allowing the merchant to make the call if and when to apply any sort of fee to this transaction. Okay, let's go ahead and mention one more point. So when it comes to customer initiated transactions, so far we've looked at transactions being run by the merchant in the virtual terminal. But let's say the merchant is using our invoice feature to send out an invoice either via email or text to their customer, and the customer is making that payment. And the ISO has, or the merchant has, the ISO has a surcharge set. So let's look at what that's going to look like. If I would create an invoice and it has a surcharge set, then when the merchant sends out that invoice to the customer, I already have an invoice sitting here, so we'll just look at it from here. This is what the customer is going to be seeing. So they're on a credit card transaction, there's a surcharge of 4%. It's not greater than a cost of acceptance. I'm sorry. This surcharge is not applied on debit card transactions. And again, the system will intuitively recognize if this is a credit card that's being used or a debit card, and only apply this fee if it's set up like that to credit transactions, but not debit transactions. So on merchant initiated transactions, meaning transactions run in the virtual terminal, you won't see any verbiage. But when we're talking about a customer making a payment, like on an invoice or on a host payment page, then verbiage is going to be displayed. That's pretty much it for showing you how the actual feature works. And you see there's quite a few questions, and we're definitely going to get to that. But I wanna first bring on James, and we'll run through a couple of questions, because something tells me a lot of the questions we'll be talking about will probably be answered in our conversation.